it going? We are on Daf Samech Amud Bet, where it says Tanya Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai Omer. So it's maybe like 12 lines from the top. The first word on the line is Betula, and then in the middle of the line it says Tanya Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai Omer. Okay, so Tanya Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai Omer, Gioret pchuta mi bat shalosh shanim v'yom echad kshira lekehuna. So the background here is that there's Samech Amud Bet. Samech Amud Bet.
Samech Amud Bet?
Yeah. The first word on the line is Betula, and then it says Tanya. So the background here is there are certain ladies that a Kohen Gadol is not allowed to marry, and certain ladies that a regular Kohen is not allowed to marry as well. So one of the ladies that a Kohen and a Kohen Gadol is not allowed to marry is a Zonah. Zonah, that's what we're gonna talk about today. What makes somebody a Zonah? Or tomorrow, then one of the Mishnayot coming up is gonna talk about what makes somebody a Zonah. Now, a Gioret is understood to be a part of the Psul Zonah, somebody who is a Gioret. Now, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai teaches that Gioret pechuta mi bat shalosh shanim v'yom echad. If someone is a Gioret under the age of 3, so kshira lekehuna, she's kshira lekehuna. She's allowed to marry a Kohen. Shneemar, because it says in the pasuk by Milchemet Midyan, when the Jews, when Bnei Israel had the milchama with Midyan, it says v'chol hataf banashim asher lo yadu mishkav zachar echeyu lachem. It says all of the taf, all of the children that they didn't have mishkav zachar, they didn't have bia with anybody, hechayu lachem, you keep.
But it says 3 years and 1 day.
Okay, so we're gonna get to that. Oh, okay, yeah, but still they just later on have to verify it, but they could do tevila and a giur at that age. What?
What year is giur?
What do you mean, what year is it? If a family, let's say a family is going through a gerut and they have children, so the young children also would go to the mikveh and go through a giur, but then they would decide afterwards. Okay, so V'harei Pinchas imahem, and by Milchemet Midyan, Pinchas was there. So if the Torah is saying these ladies that are the tough, the young children that didn't have any bia with anybody, you can keep them, and Pinchas was there. Pinchas was a Kohen, so it must be that the Kohen was allowed to marry them. So Rabbanan say la'avadim v'lishvachot. Doesn't mean keep them as a wife. It means that keep them as avadim and shvachot. So you don't have any proof. But either way, the Gemara says ihachi. If that's the case, that this is where Rabbi Shimon is learning from. So bat shalosh shanim v'yom echad nami. Even if she's older than 3, all the pasuk said was that they're lo yadu mishkav zachar. They didn't have bia. So from that pasuk, all you see is if they didn't have bia yet and they may become a gioret, even if they're older than 3 years old, even if they're 8 years old, it doesn't make a difference. So why is he saying only 3 years old? So kede Rav Huna, because he learns like Rav Huna. The Rav Huna Rami. Rav Huna, he takes a look at this parsha and he asks a stira. It says, Ktiv, it says in one pasuk, Kol isha yodat ish li mishkav zachar harogu. It says any isha that, meaning an adult woman that had bia with somebody, harogu. They have to be neherag. Ha'ena yodat yikayemu. But if she's not, if you didn't have bia with anybody, so yikayemu, you could keep her. So that's by adult ladies. So michlal da'atav ben yadu ben lo yadu yikayemu. That sounds like by the children, whether or not they had bia doesn't matter, you keep them. It says by adults, if they had bia, then harogu, by the adult women. It sounds like the children, even if they have bia, you keep them. Uchriv, but there's another pasuk that says v'chol hataf banashim asher lo yadu mishkav zachar hechayu lachem, that you keep the children that didn't have bia. Hayadu harogu, but if they had bia, then you don't keep them. So there's one pasuk sounds like by the children, I don't care if they had bia or not, you don't do anything to them, you keep them. And the other pasuk sounds like, the other pasuk seems to be saying that no, by the children. If they had a bia, then harogu. So, which one is it? The psukim don't fit.
What mean orogu?
Harogu neheragim.
Why,
Yeah.
What that means here? I don't understand. Why you have to kill
The Torah was it's talking about the Milchemet Midian.
Yeah.
That the Midianim came and they seduced Bnei Israel and they caused them to do avodah zarah. So the pasuk says Nikom nikmat Hashem et Midianim. Hashem tells Moshe first you have to take nikama against the Midianim, and there has to be a milchama against Midian.
Okay.
So the Torah says these are the people that need to be destroyed. Yeah. So one pasuk seems to be saying the adult nashim that had bia, but the ones that didn't have bia, you can leave them. Mashma that the children, you leave all of them. But another pasuk says that even kolataf banashim, even the children, if they had bia, you don't leave them. So in the psukim itself, there's a stira.
You just keep the betula?
Yes, but the question is, do you keep just the betula of the adults and the children you keep everybody, or do you keep just the betula even of the children? In the psukim, there's a little bit of a stira. So how do you solve it? So Heve Omer Beru'uya Liba'el Hakatuv Medaber. So you have to explain that the pasuk isn't saying someone who actually had bia. It's saying someone who's ra'ui for bia. Meaning, when it says the adults who had bia, harogu, and the ones who didn't keep, it means anyone who's ra'ui, at the age where it's possible to have bia. So that's where Rabbi Shimon is coming from, and that's why he says anyone who's older than 3, Gioret who's only under 3, is Kisher Alakuna. Tani Nami Hachi. The pasuk doesn't mean that she actually had bia. It means anyone who's ra'ui for bia has to be neherag. But the ones who are younger than the age that they're ra'ui for bia, those you can keep. Those you can keep. Ataomer beruya lebia. Mamash. Maybe it actually means they actually had bia, not just ra'ui to have bia. No, because of that pasuk, you have to say that we're talking about someone who's ru'uya lebia. So it's just reiterating. The Braita is basically reiterating the same cheshbon that we just said. Okay, so basically, because of the psukim, we had to explain that when it says the ladies that are not betulim, hechayulim, doesn't mean they're not betulim. What it means is ladies that are at the age where they're ra'ui lebiyah, then harogu. But the children that are at the age where they're not ra'ui lebiyah, as long as there was no biyah, hechayu lachem, you could keep them because there's no psul gior. Even if they didn't have a bia, you can't keep them. Meaning you have no proof that they're. But you have no proof that they're. What we need it for is you have no proof that they're ksherim lekuna. If they're ra'ui lebia, once they're at the age where they're ra'ui lebia, then you can't keep them they're not ksherim lekuna.
We want to know if they could get married with a kohen or stand with anybody.
That's no. So in what Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is using these psukim for is talking about getting married with a kohen, because it says Pinchas was part of that. He was part of that. He was a kohen, so whatever they're allowed to keep, it must be Pinchas getting married.
Because he did say anything. I want to begin with. By the example with the Pinchas. Pinchas is the head of the soldiers, the head of the army.
Right, so and he was a kohen. I mean, the important thing is he was a kohen. So if he's being told hechayu lachem, you keep them, that sounds like he has a heter to marry, and there's no isur of zonah here. So he proves from there that gioret under 3 is muteret to a kohen. Okay, so now the Gemara says mina yadi. How do they know who's ra'ui lebiyah, who's not? How do they know? Amar Rav Huna bar Bizna. Amar Rabbi Shimon Hasida he'evirum lifnei hatzitz. They took each lady and they brought her before the tzitz. Kol shepaneha morikot all the ladies that they like lost their ruach, their face became like emptied out from spirit. When they saw the tzitz, it was that was the sign that she was at the age where she was re'uya libael, and she had to that one you can't, those you can't keep. Kol she'en panea morikot, but if she didn't have, the face didn't lose its ruach, so beyadua she'ena ru'ya libael, then you know that she's not ru'ya libael, and those ones hechayu lachem, they could remain. Amar Rav Nachman siman le'avera hadrokan. Rav Nachman says siman that for an avera is that drokan, that it's either some type of disease, or some explains the emptying out of the ruach of the body. Okay, kayotze badavar ata omer vayimtzeu miyoshevei yavesh gilad 400 na'ara betula asher lo yadu ish lemishkav zachar. So this pasuk, the Gemara is saying similarly. You have a different instance in history. Yes. So this is, we could just read this Rashi, Ma'anshe Yavesh Gilad, small Rashi here. It says Bimei Pilegesh Begiva. This was by the time of Pilegesh Begiva, right after the instance of Pilegesh Begiva, that with Shevet Binyamin, Shne'ergu Kol Anshe Yavesh Gilad, Lefish Lo Ba'u Leilachem B'Shevet Binyamin. All the people in Yavesh Gilad, there was a war, and they were wiped out because they didn't want to come fight against Binyamin, Keshar Achim, Ve'echayu Kol Shelo Niv'ala. And over there also was a similar idea. With the ladies, any lady who was a betula, they kept. If she wasn't a betula, they didn't keep. So untanum lenotarim Shevet Binyamin lenashim. The ladies who were betulot, the city of Yavesh Gilad was wiped out, so they brought them to Shevet Binyamin for the remaining people of Binyamin. But either way, the same idea, that when there was the milchama, any lady who was a betula was kept, and the one who wasn't a betula was not kept. So says the Gemara also over there, Mina Yadi. How did they know who was a betula, who was not a betula? So Amar Rav Kahana, Hoshivu Malpi Chavit Shel Yain. Rav Kahana, they put them on top of a chavit of yain. Beula Rechanodaf. If she was not a betula, there was a certain smell that certain scent that came out. Betula ein rechanodaf. Betula, there was no scent, right? Actually, some say that this is like a natural thing. It's like a scientific thing that because when there's no betulim, it caused some type of thing.
Air is going to go from here.
I don't know exactly how it works. But there was some. I don't know how it works, but there was some, some scent that would be emanated, some odor that would come in. Okay, v'na'avrinu lifnei tzitz, says the Gemara. Why didn't we put them before the tzitz like they did by Midian?
Yeah.
So Amar Rav Kahana b'rei Rav Natan leratzon lahem ketiv. It says that the pasuk by the tzitz says leratzon lahem, that it's a ratzon, it's for good. Leratzon v'lo puranut. Tzitz is for good, not for puranut. So they didn't use the tzitz for this. So the Gemara says Yachi b'Midian nami. The Gemara says okay, but by Milchemet Midian also then don't use the tzitz, because that's also puranut, to use it to know who remains and who doesn't by Milchama. So Amar Rav Ashi lahem ktiv. It says leratzon lahem, right? Lahem leratzon v'lo puranut. For Bnei Yisrael, it's the tzitz is leratzon and not lepuranut, not for bad things. But ulovdei kochavim afil lepuranut. But for ovdei kochavim, it's even lepuranut, which means you could use the tzitz for Milchemet Midian to know who to remain and who not. But for Bnei Yisrael, you don't use the tzitz. That's why they had to use this wine barrel, the wine barrel method. Okay. Amar Rabbi Yaakov Baridi, Amar Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, Halachak Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. So Rabbi Yaakov Baridi, he taught that halacha is like Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, that if you have a gioret less than 3 years old, she's muteret to kiuna. Amar le Rabbi Zera Rabbi Yaakov Bar Idi. So Rabbi Zera heard this is Rabbi Yaakov Bar Idi says this is the halacha. So he said to him, Beferush mi'alach or michlala shmi'alach. Did you hear this? You heard this as a teaching clearly that halacha is like Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, or you just heard some story or something and you on your own are coming to that conclusion? So my kilala, what would be the michlala? What would be the story that he heard or the psak that he heard that he came to the conclusion on his own? So the Amar Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, achat haita be'eretz Yisrael shekara alea irur. So the case was like this. Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi said that one time there was a city in Eretz Yisrael that there was some problem with the yichus of one of the families over there. Some people were complaining about it. They wanted to look into the yichus. V'shagar Rebbe et Rebbe Rumnus ubadka, and Rebbe sent Rebbe Rumnus to that city to go check it out to see what's the problem. Matzaba bat gioret pchuta mibat shalosh shanim v'yom echad. They found that there was this scenario where someone, a kohen, took a gioret that she was megayeret when she was little, under 3 years old, and she ended up marrying a kohen, and that's why people were talking about the yichus, that maybe
over 3 years old.
Under pechuta mibat shalosh shanim v'yom echad. She was under 3.
Yom echad.
Right. So she was under 3 years old, and that was causing a whole tumult. Everybody was saying, "Oh, they cannot marry a kohen," and these kohanim are now chalalim. So v'yechshira Rabbi lekuna, and Rabbi paskind like Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai that just kashira lekuna. So when they asked Rabbi Yaakov Bar Idi, "Oh, where do you hear this psak that this is the halacha?" So did you hear it from this story, or that psak is like Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai? So Amar le beferush mi'ali. He said, no, I didn't hear it from this story. I heard straight that halacha is like Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. So if he would have learned from this story, what's the difference? What's the difference? He heard this story, this is the psak, or he on his own, learned the teaching that this is the psak. What does it make a difference? So dilma shaniyatam hoil v'insiv. Maybe you can learn from the story that halacha is like Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, and lechatchila you're allowed to marry a gioret, a kohen is allowed to marry a gioret, because maybe that case was different, because since they was already married, the Rebbe said, okay, once they're already married, we'll let it be. We could be mekil. Once there's a svara that hoil v'insiv, once they're already married, so they could remain married. Right? Now, why would we say that? Deha Rav Rabbi Yochanan Damri Tarvayu Bogeret Umkat Etz Lo Yisav Im Nasa Nasui. That by Kohen Gadol, that he's not allowed to marry a Bogeret or a Mukat Etz, right? Someone that lost their Betulim because of a piece of wood or something like that. But Im Nasa Nasui, if he married her, he doesn't have to divorce. The marriage could remain. So you see from there's a concept that if you're already married, in certain cases, you don't have to divorce. So over here also, by the Gioret, maybe he said, look, let it be, because they're already married, so you don't have to divorce. So the Gemara says, no. That's not a good, you can't do that. That's not a good comparison, the Mukat Etz to the Gioret. Why? B'shlama hatam sofa liot bogeret tachtav. Sofa liot be'ula tachtav. By the Mukat Etz, at the end of the day, after she marries a Kohen Gadol, at some point, she's going to not have Betulim. So over there's a svara to say, okay, so she lost it through a piece of wood beforehand, but at the end of the day, when she's married to him, she's going to be in that situation. But you don't say that by other psulim.
What did you say?
We had this svara before that by a Kohen Gadol to a, let's just say to a Mukat Etz, right? So he's not allowed to marry a Mukat Etz, but if he does, he doesn't have to divorce her. Why? Because Sofa liot Mukat Etz tachtav. Because anyways, she's going to lose her Betulim once she's married to him. So since she's going to be at that status after they're married, he doesn't have to divorce. Okay, that's not true by, let's say, a grusha. She's not gonna be a grusha once they're married, or an almana. She's not gonna be an almana once they're married. But a mukar et, she's gonna lose her betulim eventually, anyways. So by that, there's a svara that you don't have to break it up if they already got married. But you can't say that here by a gioret, because the psula is a psula of zona. Zona, you don't say, oh, she's gonna be a zona anyways once they're married. That's not true. So, right, hacha sofa liyot zona tachtav. What over here? You're gonna say, oh, she's gonna end up being a zona anyway, so let them stay. That's not true. Right? Rav Safra matnin al michlala v'kashele umshani lehacher. Rav Safra, he had a little bit of a different version of this conversation, but the same cheshbon. He said that Rabbi Yaakov Bar Idi learned this halacha from the story, and they asked him a question that how could you learn from this story? It's this story is he was already married, hoil v'insiv, and that's why they let it go. But you can't learn that a kohen is allowed to marry lechatchila someone who's gurush, who's a gioret under that age. And he answered, no, you don't have a svara of hoil v'insiv over here. Okay, let's go further. So there was a kohen who one time married a gioret who was megayeret under 3 years old. Amar le Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, my high. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak said, what are you doing? Why are you marrying gioret? You're kohen. So Amar le Dam Rabbi Yaakov bar Idi, Amar Rabbi Shua ben Levi, halachak Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai. He said, well, I was told that halacha is like Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, that it's allowed. Amar le zilapik. He said, no, you have to divorce her. So v'ilo, and if you don't, mifakin alach Rabbi Yaakov bar Idi meonach. I'm gonna remove Rabbi Yaakov bar Idi from your ear. Like meaning, he said this is not the halacha. Halacha is not like Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai in this case. Okay, Tanya. Gemara brings another brighter. Let's try to go to the Mishnah. V'chen haya Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai omer. Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai also taught a different teaching. He said, Kivrei ovdei kochavim ein mitamein be'ohel. Right, a kohen is not allowed to become tameh met, and part of tumat met is also tumat ohel. He cannot be in the same ohel as a met. Now, if he goes to Beit HaKvarot, he can't go there because there's tumat ohel. The tumat just rises all the way up, and he can't be in the area over the met. Now, what about kivrei ovdei kochavim? Right, if you have a kever of ovdei kochavim, either going to the Beit HaKvarot or in a room with Oved Kochavim, so it's enan metamein be'ohel. Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai has a teaching that Oved Kochavim, they're not metamein be'ohel. Shneimar, it says in the pasuk, va'aten tzoni tzon mariti adam atem. So it says adam atem by Bnei Yisrael. Atem kurim adam, ve'ena Oved Kochavim kurim adam. Whenever it says adam, it's referring to Bnei Yisrael and not Oved Kochavim. And tumat ohel, the Torah says adam ki yamut be'ohel. So it says specifically Adam, and that's referring to Bnei Yisrael. So by Bnei Yisrael there's Tumat Ohel. By Ovdei Kochavim there's no Tumat Ohel. Right? Meitive, the Gemara asks a question on this. You're telling me Adam always means Bnei Yisrael? It says V'nefesh Adam Shisha Asar Aleph. It says in Pasuk is referring to the Midyanim. Nefesh Adam Shisha Asar Aleph, it calls them Adam, and they're Midyanim. No, Mishum Behema. Over there, it's because the Pasuk is talking about Adam, Behema, meaning it's because the Pasuk is... No. It's because the Psukim is taking account of everything that was brought back from the Milchama. So it's listing Behema, and also lists Adam. So it says Adam not because they're... not because they're always called Adam. It's just in comparison to Behema, we're going to call them Adam. Right? Asher yesh ba harbe mishtem esrei ribu Adam. Also, another pasuk also calls Ovdei Kochavim Adam. Right? Asher lo yada ben yamino l'smolo. Okay, so again, umishum Behema. In that pasuk also, it only uses the word Adam to refer to the Ovdei Kochavim, because as opposed to Behema, because the pasuk later on mentions Behema, so it's going to mention Adam. But in general, whenever it says Adam Stam, not near a place where it mentions Behema, it's referring to Israel. Okay, the Gemara says we have another pasuk, Kol Horeg Nefesh V'chol Nogea Bechalal Titchatau. So this was after Milchemet Midyan. It said anybody who was Horeg Nefesh or Nogea Bechalal, they came in contact with a dead body. So Titchatau, they have to go through the process of becoming tahor. So let me ask you a question. If you're telling me there's no tum'at met by Ovdei Kochavim, why do they have to go through a process of becoming tahor? What do you mean? They fought Midyan. It says, whoever came in contact who is a koreg nefesh or nogea b'chalal, he has to become tahor. Why do you have to become tahor? According to what Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai said.
Because maybe the hand is with the blood.
Okay, so the Gemara says, Dilma iktil chad me Yisrael. Maybe there was one of Bnei Israel that was niftar over there, and he came in contact with that body. So maybe that's why he has to become tahor. But for Ovdei Kochavim, there's no tumat ohel. V'Rabbanan, and the Rabbanan, they argue, they say, Lo nifkad mimenu ish. Pasuk says that Lo nifkad mimenu ish. None of Bnei Israel were lost. Nobody died in that milchama. Yeah. So how could you say, maybe they came in contact with a dead Israel? There was no dead Israel. None of them died. For Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, Lo nifkad mimenu ish la'avera. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai says, you know what it means, Lo nifkad mimenu ish la'avera. It doesn't mean no one was lost to doing avera, but not meaning they fought the whole war and they didn't take any of the ladies of Midian. They didn't do anything any avera like they did in the past with Midian. But people being lost in war, casualties they had. So it could be that one of Bnei Israel was niftar, and the Torah is saying, maybe you came in contact with them, therefore you have to come tahor. Ravina Amar, Ravina says, no, I have the explanation, different explanation. Nehi dema'atin hukra ma'atmuye be'ohel. It's true, the pasuk excludes Ovdei Kochavim from tumat ohel. Tichtiv Adam ki yamut ba'ohel. The pasuk says Adam ki yamut ba'ohel, and that's only Bnei Yisrael have tumat ohel. But mimagau masami mi'atin hukra. There's also tumat met if a person touches and if a person moves the met. There's tumat magan masa. That the Ovdei Kochavim still have. So
if a yid touch the met of the Kochavim, it becomes tameh.
Yeah, but if he's in the same room, he's not. Yes, that's what Ravina is. That's what Ravina is saying. Okay, Chazakim Mubruch.